designation of Houthis as a terrorist group is first step toward Yemen's liberation. The United Nations says that ending the war can resolve Yemen's humanitarian crisis. Iran-backed Houthis drones threaten Yemen and the entire region. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Rushan Fuad. The Yemeni government labeling the Houthis as a terrorist group is a long-awaited step. Such a move came after the government made a number of concessions, putting into consideration ending the suffering of Yemenis. Yet it seems the rebel militia has mistaken those government's concessions as weakness. This report has more details.
The Yemeni Presidential Council announced days ago the classification of the Houthis as a terrorist organization, which means the scenario of a military escalation against the Houthis may be among the options presented. Analysts believe that the classification of Houthis as a terrorist organization is in order to expand the legality of any military operation so that it takes an international and regional dimension. The Yemeni government can request international support with quality weapons, modern technologies, and even intelligence information within the anti-terror agreements. They added that the decision is supposed to end any negotiation process with the Houthis and to close the funding outlets for them through the organizations operating in their areas of control, in addition to preventing any international contact with them, especially since some countries were planning to open offices in Sana'a. As for the international and regional dimensions of the decision, analysts believe that the rebels may respond to any temporary truce. Otherwise, they will be forced to enter a confrontation. For its part, the Houthi militia has warned the government of the possibility of targeting a number of facilities, and these warnings are aimed first at preventing the government from continuing to benefit from oil and gas revenues, especially with a rise in energy prices, and thus creating more pressure to deliver or at least share revenues to pay the salaries of civil and military employees. The Houthis are also targeting a popular cover, as they claim, and it is related to targeting any foreign military presence south of the country.
Yemen called on the Forum of the Islamic Councils to classify the Houthi militia as a terrorist group, based on the decision made by the Yemeni government. The representative of Yemen clarified that the Houthis keep targeting the Yemeni people in order to serve the Iranian agenda, adding that this terrorist militia poses a threat to Yemen, the region, and the world. The United Nations said that a ceasefire is the only way to end Yemen's humanitarian crisis. The conflict has entered its 8th year, claiming thousands of civilians' lives. The following report gives more details.
The United Nations stressed that peace is the only option to end the humanitarian crisis in Yemen. The country is witnessing the worst humanitarian crisis, according to UN reports, with more than two-thirds of the population in need of assistance as a result of the repercussions of the war that erupted 8 years ago. Internal displacement affects around 2.3 million people, half of whom are children. Furthermore, 85 million children are reported to have died from malnutrition and diseases. Also, bombing vulnerable targets such as schools, hospitals, and public spaces has become the new normal, with people bearing the brunt of the consequences. In addition, women and girls are particularly affected, as more than 6.5 million of childbearing age require immediate access to protection services. The humanitarian situation in the country is poised to get even worse by December 2022, with the number of people who won't be able to meet their minimum food needs in Yemen reaching a record of 19 million people. Despite efforts to offer humanitarian relief to Yemeni residents, limited access to food, medical care, and water supplies are regularly utilized as weapons of war. Houthis control key ports, which means that the man-made starvation is suffocating the people in Yemen. Also, aid workers are hampered in their capacity to reach the individuals they are seeking to help because they are required to spend extra time at borders and checkpoints. Finally, the United Nations office in Yemen said in a statement on the occasion of the United Nations Day that its agencies and partners partners are doing their best to help millions of people in need of assistance in Yemen, adding that this is a reminder that the crisis in Yemen is mainly driven by the prolonged conflict and only peace can end it.
The U.S. State Department accused Iran of sending drones and providing support to the Houthis in Yemen. The U.S. State Department said Iran sends drones to the Houthis and other groups to carry out terrorist activities. The position of the U.S. administration comes in light of Tehran's alignment with Riyadh in light of the global oil crisis. The Houthi drone attacks inside Yemen and beyond borders are raising concerns of the international community. Military experts warn that such weapon in the hand of a terrorist group can pose a real threat to Yemen and the entire region. The following report has more details.
The Joint Forces stationed to protect the port of Mukalla, which was shot down by a drone belonging to the Houthi militia on Tuesday evening that tried to target the port in Hadramaut Governorate. Local sources said that the forces stationed to protect the port of Mukalla by spotting a Houthi drone, and thankfully they were able to shoot it down. This comes 4 days after the militia's terrorist attacks on Al Dabba oil port in the same governorate, which were met with widespread international condemnation. The attack on Al Dabba port was carried out 2 weeks after the Houthi militia's threat after the end of the truce, as the militia vowed to target international oil and navigation companies, as the efforts of the United Nations didn't succeed in reaching an agreement to renew and expand the truce, which expired at the beginning of this month due to the Houthi militia's stubbornness and their endless additional demands, which were unacceptable by the international community. The U.S. Ambassador to Yemen, Stephen Fagan, condemned the targeting of Al Dabba port, calling for an immediate halt to the attacks that constitute an affront to their rights and freedom of navigation and endanger international trade. And because the recent Houthi attacks were the first of their kind, targeting oil export ports in the Arabian Sea, they provoked Yemenis at popular and official levels, and it had widespread Arab and international condemnation. At the local level, the Constitution and Reconciliation Commission denounced the targeting on Al Dabba port and Al Nashima port in Shabwa Governorate, and considered it a real undermining of the efforts to bring peace in Yemen, and a new confirmation that the Houthi militia don't want peace.
أبي مات بشارع 40 دحين أنا أشقى على أسرتي مع باقي اللي أنا أصرف عليهم كل شيء. أنا اسمي أنس غصيب سيف، عمري 12 سنة. أنا أشتغل بورشة حديد من الساعة 7 للساعة 6. أحيانا أسرع، أحيانا أقص، أحيانا أرنق، أحيانا أنقش، أي حاجة أنا أعمل. لا الساعة لما تدين الساعة 6 أوقف. أنا وقفت الدراسة عشان ما فيش أحد يشقى على أسرتي، أدرس إخواني الباقي من لون 4 وأنا الخامس. أحلم إن أفتح ورشة أبي وأشقى على أسرتي وأندي لهم مصاري وأدرس إخوتي الآخر الجامعات وأطبخ وأي شيء.
The Yemeni government allowed the entry of 2 new fuel ships to the port of Hodeidah. This brought the number of oil ships that arrived at the Houthi-controlled port to 6 since the end of the humanitarian truce by the beginning of this month. The entry of the ship comes despite the Yemeni government's designation of the Houthi group as a terrorist organization. The government confirmed that the decision to classify al-Houthi as a terrorist group would not affect humanitarian activities. The Saudi Program for Development and Reconstruction in Yemen announced the arrival of the first batches of the new oil derivatives grant. The program said that the first batch will allow operation of 70 power stations in Yemen to serve hospitals, medical centers, roads, schools, government facilities, and will contribute to improving all aspects of life in the governorates. Coming next. A Yemeni coffee house in the United States serves coffee and heritage.
ما نزحنا من نزحة وانهم فوقنا 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 هدموا بيوتنا. نزحت أنا وأنا بنتي بنت 7 أشهر اللي على زوجي. بعدها تم أنا من نزح في نزوح وأقبل الفريق معرض منه. صيحنا لزوجي وسار وداه هنا سار مخيم. وأقبل الفريق إلى هنا وأنا وجيعي في الخيمة وعانني البنات ودني العلاج ساعدني لما دخلني الشبكة طولي علاج فيتامينات. جاتنا الأمطار دخلت السيول وأنا والدة دخل السيل ما دهنت بالسيل له تحتي وأنا والدة ما قلت لي يومين
ولا عاد حتى قدرت أشل عيالي ما بلاتي يا بنت الصغيرة اللي ترضع شليتها وإحنا والله نحن حالتنا حالة وما عاد إلا شلونا من رفعونا لمكان عالي. ووصل اليوم جسنا لنا 3 أيام والله نحن في العراق وجاونا الفريق حقهم حق الاستجابة والله ما قصروا قدموا لنا من كل شيء.
Welcome back. The Yemeni Teachers Syndicate called for a comprehensive strike in all education facilities in Houthi-run areas. This came in a statement in which it affirmed its rejection of the dismissal and targeting of teachers and educational workers, the change and distortion of curriculum, the insulting of teachers, and the deprivation of their rights. In Lahj Governorate, Al Turba School is one of the oldest educational facilities in the city. However, time and war have impacted the school and the building, facing the risk of collapsing at any time. The following report has more details.
Children in Yemen are experiencing learning disruptions. Al Turba School in Lahj is one of the first schools established in the district because of its old and educational role in Al Sabayha area, but its condition today is affecting everyone after it deteriorated, where windows and doors of the schools are destroyed as a result of the war. The school, which recently started to resume the educational process after the strike was lifted, is facing several dangers, all of which threaten the possibility of its building collapsing over the students' heads after the concerned authorities failed to restore it, which aggravates the deterioration of the school's situation.
This is a Turba school and many years have passed and it's collapsing. Everything in the school is destroyed and this puts risk on the lives of students.
Despite the complete destruction of Al Turba school, hopes remain in obtaining sources of funding for the restoration of the school in a way that preserves the history and importance of this school, from which many state cadres graduated, most notably the former Minister of Defense.
We're struggling from the destruction of this school. This school building is completely shattered and students are at risk from getting cold in winter and books are getting ripped from the rain.
Yemen's schools have not been spared in the country's prolonged conflict. At least 1 out of every 4 educational facilities has been destroyed, damaged, or used for non-educational purposes in the last 8 years, yet no efforts are done from the concerned authorities to fix the educational system in Yemen.
The war has impacted the infrastructure of most of educational facilities, let alone the economic suffering of teachers and students. All of this has cast a shadow on the quality of the education Yemeni children receive. The following report has more on this story.
The ongoing conflict in Yemen and the devastating consequences of forced displacement and damaged or occupied school buildings have disrupted the education of more than 2 million children. Since the beginning of the conflict, child marriage and recruitment have increased, depriving millions of children of opportunities to learn. After nearly 8 years of armed conflict, Yemen is experiencing a crisis in education and will have far-reaching consequences. According to UNICEF figures, over 2 million children are out of school, over 4 million need support to access education, and over 20% of all primary and secondary schools are closed. Students and teachers have been killed or injured at or on their way to school, while a lack of salary has forced thousands of teachers to look for other options. The danger and economic impact of the conflict has also forced thousands of families to stop sending their children, notably girls, to schools. Over the last 8 years, at least 1 out of every 4 educational facilities has been destroyed, damaged, or used for non-educational purposes. Under international humanitarian law, parties to a conflict must ensure that all necessary measures are taken to protect civilians and civilian infrastructure. In the highly volatile context of Yemen, where many children have only ever known life in conflict, safe access to education can alleviate the psychological impact of violence by offering children a sense of routine. Addressing Yemen's education crisis requires a comprehensive and a multi-sector approach that addresses all basic needs.
A number of shops were closed in Aden, southern Yemen. Shop owners protested against the local authorities' imposition of unlawful levies. About 300 shops were reported to close in Sheikh Othman district in a comprehensive strike. A number of heavy transport drivers in 3 liberated Yemeni governorates staged a protest. Dozens of protesters chanted and raised slogans condemning the abuse and practices against them, which led to arrest and imprisonment under multiple charges. This has paralyzed the union and caused suffering and harm to a number of drivers. There are different types of Yemeni coffee. Harazi coffee is one famous type. At Yemen Coffee House in the United States opened to serve this type of Yemeni coffee. More details are in this report.
After visiting Yemen and viewing the traditional techniques of making coffee, Hamza Nasser brought the aroma of the Yemeni coffee to the United States, which was very different from how coffee is manufactured in USA, according to his statement. Haraz Coffee House, which has a flagship location in Dearborn, is set to open a new shop in Anborn by early 2023.
Coffee is something that I've always had a passion for. When I traveled to Yemen, I noticed that every different place in Yemen that I visited, their blends were different. Coffee is very interesting. Why don't we have this kind of stuff, back home in the United States?
The coffee at this cafe is all from Yemen, but they have a variety of brewing methods, including Yemeni, Turkish, Saudi, and American. Furthermore, all of the coffee beans are organic and sourced directly from farmers in Yemen, where they are sun-dried. They also have a decaf alternative made from coffee husks. One of the most popular beverages, according to Hamza, is the iced caramel macchiato, but his favorite is the Yemeni-style black coffee. Many of their drinks have spices like ginger and cinnamon in them. In addition to serving coffee, Haraz Coffee House also offers classes and catering. But the real secret to Nasser's success has been the shop's brewing method.
We have the Haraz Barista Academy. There are a lot more people who have passion for coffee than I thought. You come here, we train you, and we help you even buy the right equipment for your coffee shop, because that was one of my biggest challenges. I purchased almost $20,000 in equipment that I never used.
Haraz Coffee House serves coffee made in a traditional Yemeni style that heats milk, coffee grounds, and cinnamon together, rather than adding an espresso shot to steamed milk. The owner named the cafe Haraz after the ancient villages of Haraz Mountains in Yemen, thrive 3,000 meters above the sea, which continuously produces the perfect conditions to grow the most aromatic coffee beans in the world. Now, centuries later, Haraz remains a globally acclaimed exporter of the most sought-after coffee.
Here is a reminder of the main headlines. Designation of Houthis as a terrorist group is first step toward Yemen's liberation. The United Nations says that ending the war can resolve Yemen's humanitarian crisis. Iran-backed Houthi drones threaten Yemen and the entire region. This is the end of the news. It was Rushan Fouad. See you soon.